are talking Insane Like Me, and this is directed by Chip Joslin, who co-wrote this with Britt Bankhead, who actually stars as our main character, Jake Morgan. Now, with a title like Insane Like Me, I was actually expecting a kind of psychological horror movie with maybe some artistic flourishes. That is not what this movie is about. This is a very low budget and I have to say somewhat amateurish feeling vampire movie. It does attempt to have a little bit of context in regards to someone's mental state, but it's a very tenuous link indeed. Anyway, let's talk about the story. So it focuses on this guy who is a military vet coming back from somewhere, and he meets up with his girlfriend who is pregnant, but he doesn't know this at that point. They go to this party in this abandoned hotel, like you do, and this hotel happens to be full of vampires, and they effectively slaughter many people there, and this guy ends up kind of escaping, but he is blamed for the killing, or the missing people really, because they turn into vampires and buggered off. And he ends up in a psychiatric hospital for 9 years, and now 9 years later he's out trying to find out what has happened, and all in the meantime he's kind of seeing visions of his ex-girlfriend, and he's having to deal with obviously this kind of nest of vampires, but he's also got the kind of the pressure from the kind of the local sheriff, played by Eric Roberts, the kind of the recognisable name in this movie. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, this is a very low budget movie and expectations must be checked before we kind of talk about something like this. But yes, it is extremely low budget. What does work in this movie's favour? As I've mentioned, this movie is not quite as deep as I was expecting, but there is an attempt here to have at least a little bit of context in regards to one's mental state and how this, our main character, is having to kind of effectively blag his way out of this mental asylum, because he is still seeing visions of his ex-girlfriend and hallucinations, but he kind of pretends like he isn't. And you know, people are sort of, oh, he's keeps on going on about vampires, he's clearly insane, and he's going to try to sort of play down in certain circles, but obviously trying to convince people and others and things. But all in the meantime, he's sort of seeing visions of his girlfriend pop up here and there. So I kind of quite like that psychological aspect of it. They don't do a whole lot with it. It doesn't really inform the story, to be honest with you. It's more just sort of window dressing, if anything, but nonetheless, it does give it a little bit of an interesting context in kind of regards to the character. The guy who plays our main character, who is also one of the co-writers, I feel takes his role very seriously. The rest of the movie around him is extraordinarily hokey and cheesy, but this guy is like full on like angst mode, if that makes sense. So, you know, his performance seems somewhat earnest, I will say, and you know, I'll give him that. And he seems like there's an attempt here, it's like, you know, mental scream and all this, and it's, you know, I appreciate the attempt. It kind of looks a little weird in this low budget B movie, I have to say, but I'll give it, you know, I'll give credit where there is at least an attempt here. This movie has a surprisingly large body count. The vampires drop plenty of victims. There's lots of sexy women, lots of sexy vampires, and the head vampire, again, it's not massively developed, but he's somewhat of an interesting character because he seems to be doing like scientific, as a vampire, he's kind of like a scientist, but he's doing sort of a little bit of kind of scientific experiments on people, but he is a vampire and he has those, you know, urges and things. So that, again, not a huge amount is done with that, but there's just a little bit of, you know, it induces just a little bit, and then, you know, ultimately doesn't do a huge amount with it. So, I mean, the acting, I'll be kind and say it's a mixed bag. Some performances fare better than others. There are a couple that are okay. But largely, I feel the acting is somewhat amateurish. And this now transitions to what doesn't work. It's a very amateur feeling film, this one. And again, the acting, as I said, a lot of the kind of the somewhat large cast, to be fair, you know, don't fare particularly well, I have to say. You know, it feels like maybe non-professional actors or people early in their career, or they haven't done a lot of takes and things like this. The general look and feel of the movie is just incredibly cheap. When we go to this, and I air quote, abandoned hotel, which looks perfectly kind of well decorated and in great condition, but you know, it's abandoned. And apparently it's infested with vampires, but you know, only this guy seems to run across them. But yeah, it's all hokey, and then we kind of see this, like, I mean, I wasn't quite sure what I was expecting. I don't tend to watch trailers and stuff before I view a film or even read much about it. So I try to go in somewhat blind. And it started off, and I was like, okay, you know, let's see what they've got here. But when we actually start, when we see our vampires, I'm thinking, oh my god, this is like extraordinarily cheesy. I mean, these vampires just come across as super cheese factory. Let me just say that. And we start with a couple of like female vampires, and then we get this kind of like bald guy, and he's kind of like in ratty sort of clothes, and he's like, I was thinking, oh god, you know, it's going from bad to worse, and it's just like so hokey. The vampires, I have to say, are so poorly handled in this movie. There's no attempt here to have them like in shadow or mysterious or kind of threatening. They just seem like porn parody vampires is the best way I would describe it. It wouldn't surprise me if this was a porn parody with the porn bits cut out, if that makes sense. Certainly in regards to the vampire scenes. It's just very silly. And then we have like just strange decisions, like we have like in the prologue we have these guys go into this party in this hotel, right? And there's two couples. There's this main character and his girlfriend, and then there's like the deputy sheriff who ends up being the deputy sheriff and his girlfriend. But somehow the deputy sheriff remembers nothing about any kind of vampires, or it's just like, what? And no one seems to go looking for the rest of these people. You know, there's no evidence about what has happened. It's just kind of like, it's just where people have all gone missing. They've all happened to be in this kind of hotel, but there's no evidence, nothing like that. It just seems like so slapped together. And it's just, as the film goes on, and we're having these altercations with vampires and stuff, it's just not very well handled, and it becomes like, well, it literally becomes like you're watching a porn parody minus the porn, and it's as exciting as that sounds, you know. So I feel this movie, you know, it had a seed of a good idea here and there. The psychological stuff, the kind of the master vampire who's somewhat interested in the science behind the vampires, but it does nothing with them. This guy, our main character, looks like he's acting like he's in a different film to everyone else, which is surprising because he's one of the co-writers. It's ultimately not a particularly fun experience. I feel that the idea may have been interesting, but it needed to lean into the more of the psychology. The vampires need to be pulled back a little bit and played a little bit more kind of like dangerous, a little bit more mysterious, not quite as like, well, you know, stupid. And it may have been an okay film, but as it stands, I have to be honest with you, it's a little bit of a poor effort. I'll give this one a 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.